Hey everybody, I'm going to give some people some time to jump in and get on board and move in because it's exactly 10 o'clock. But yeah, so welcome to the Inspire Local webinars. We've been doing these weekly, and we're really excited to be able to bring in some really amazing experts in a lot of different fields and let them empower you with some information. And so this week we really wanted to focus around customer experience and what that means and what that can look like going forward. So we're really excited to be able to bring Brandon Poole to you. Just as a reminder, in the bottom of the Zoom window, there's the Q&A section. So Brandon's going to do a presentation, and then Katie and John and I are going to ask him some questions and have a conversation around that, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll go through those with Brandon before we let him go. So with all of that said, to give you a bit of background, Brandon is the managing director and the restaurant food service lead at Cult Collective. He has over 20 years of progressive cross-functional experience with Boston Pizza, Canada Bread, which is Maple Leaf Foods, and Pita Pit Canada. And he's extremely familiar with Kingston, as he's spent a lot of time here working with Pita Pit over the last several years. An active catalyst for change and advocate for innovation, Brandon works with brands to develop customer engagement models that build long-term customer affinity, increase cultural relevance, and ignite permanent brand differentiation. And with that, Brandon, I'm just going to give it over to you and let you run with it. And we're really excited to speak with you today.
Thanks very much, guys. I appreciate you having me today. I'm excited to talk to the group, and it's great to meet you and kind of virtually be back in Kingston for a little bit here. I'll just jump on the screen right now. Again, thanks for having me. Really quick intro on the collective, as it sounds a little bit different to people that are used to working with traditional agencies. The beginning of this year, I left a long career in client-side restaurant and food service, and started working with the group that I got to know really well in my time with Pita Pit, the Cult Collective. It's less an agency as it is a partnership of entrepreneurial marketing professionals who help brand leaders and their organizations adopt audience engagement best practices that attract more prospects, increase customer loyalty, boost buy-in amongst staff, franchisees, and strategic partners. It's a good fit for me in the restaurant vertical, joining the collective. I'm a 25-year restaurant industry insider if I include my several years working on the front lines and doing all the dirty work at bars and restaurants in Burlington, Ontario. Client-side experience navigating fear, change, and disruption in an uncertain food service marketplace. I hope this to folks that are in the restaurant industry or that know the restaurant industry and are familiar. I hope my perspectives make sense. Like I said, I'm a lifer. I've worked not just in marketing, but through multiple restaurant functions, from operations and frontline training to local or regional marketing, franchise sales even, and then obviously as leading the brand at Pita Pit Canada over the last 7 years. January 2020, I entered this new chapter with the collective, driven by really three fundamental truths that were really drove forward a need to change and to get out into the industry and the marketplace and talk to brands. Number one, we are in an increasingly crowded, complex marketplace, rapidly being disrupted, while customers are losing interest in irrelevant and undifferentiated brands. Now, this is, I always like to bring to the table a little bit more. This is a hard slide to see. But I'll explain it to you really quickly. This is American data from Earnest Research. And basically what this shows to you is that the the increases that we've seen in fast casual and QSR in the US, and I'll bring some Canadian data into this, but these are actually orders per customer frequency. So you can see there's quite a gap there, but even the top guys, when you look in there, and I'll revisit Chick-fil-A on the QSR side, but this just in their orders per customer, they only showed an increase, and this is one of the big success stories out there, of 3.3%. And you can see a lot of negatives out there. So in the US, we're certainly seeing where the disruption and certainly the different the lack of engagement with customers was starting to show through in the data. Going to Canada, you can see this is a pretty simple map to understand here. You can see creeping through 2019, 2020, and projections through. This is StatsCan, Restaurants Canada through StatsCan. You can see that there's a continuing decline in sales growth projected for commercial food service. That's disturbing. You can see where it's dipped down, but clearly something's happening. There's disruption in the marketplace that's driving people away from restaurants. At the same time, we're seeing more and more restaurants come into the mix, joining into the marketplace, which makes things more complex. This is my favorite metric in terms of restaurants. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, guys, but certainly would welcome any conversation that digs a little bit deeper into the metrics. This is average restaurant volume. This is the metric that I, over the years, have really kind of leaned on, mainly because same-store sales, sales growth, even average sale can be affected tremendously by price increases and inflation as well, and those often aren't built into the numbers that are shared through the industry. When you look at average restaurant unit volume, it's hard to hide, especially when you take away the menu inflation, because it shows the capability of restaurants to grow. And overall in Canada, heading into 2020, you could see there with the negative percentage average unit volume growth, the pie was shrinking, and it was getting harder and harder to operate inside of that for restaurants and restaurant brands across Canada. Point number 2, it's time to shift outdated thinking away from traditional marketing and invest in customer engagement principles that build long-term customer affinity, increase cultural relevance, and ignite permanent brand differentiation. I'll dig into those in a bit, but just to show you guys one of the big players in the industry here, not to slag Tim Hortons, one of the greatest brands ever, iconic Canadian brand, but you can see also one of the biggest spenders on traditional marketing. And you can see where that's actually taken this brand. It's not the only reason, but certainly, in a brand that's had some struggles throughout operationally, organizationally, and certainly has had a lot of change and disruption in their own right, the biggest advertising spend does not help. And in fact, the more you put out a message, an inconsistent message about who you are, the more it confuses customers. And as you can see, the more they run away. So just wanted to point that out as well to kind of show you where we were heading and where I was heading in my thinking heading into 2020. So therefore, marketing as we know it must therefore change. Planning, execution, and metrics should focus on increasing relevance, affinity, and intent through the customer journey. So again, looking at this, it's less about targeting sales, and it's more about targeting actual results and gaining insights towards those results that reflect an increased relevance with your customers, affinity, which is like loyalty, hyper loyalty. It's when a customer or a person can see in you the things that they aspire to be, and intent. So meaning throughout the customer journey, from when a customer hears about you, you're recommended to them, they're in your restaurant, or they're buying something online, to after the experience, driving intent through each of those. If a customer finds you, if a customer is seeking you, how quickly can that be converted into a sale? That's important. That's intent. And also the experience you provide can actually create intent as customers driven through the loyalty loop inside of making them more loyal, depending on the experience that you provide. I'll use Chick-fil-A here. There's lots of examples, but as a company that's got it right, clearly this is kind of one of the darlings, an example of a U.S. brand that I think has done a great job at, certainly not looking at by my suggestion, but a lesson to everybody about, how to really think of the customer first, drive that customer experience, recognize the customer journey, and stay true to who your brand is. Use that in your communications. Don't veer away from it. Bring clarity to the experience that you're providing, and bring promise into the experience you're providing. It's far more engaging. There's Canadian examples too, but this is just, I always find more data in the US brands. Won't dive into this. This is more earnest research, but what you can see along the left-hand side here, guys, is orders per customer. So you have all along through this spectrum, some brands that we've all heard of in the US. Basically, the relationship here is, if you see McDonald's on the left, their average ticket is quite low, under $10, but their incidences and their frequency is high. The ideal scenario for a brand to drive sales would actually be to have a high ticket and high visits. And you can see by here that Chick-fil-A is probably the best performer, not probably, but by the indicator here, with a higher ticket, certainly not the highest, but with a higher ticket, and still creating those customer incidences through how loyal customers are to them. So you can see aspiring to doing the things that these brands do. It's not complicated, but just simply focusing on a clear message about who you are and utilizing that to really drive engagement with your customers over and over again. So our reality at the end of 2019, I knew the industry was going to need help, motivated really myself to jump in, partner up with a forward-thinking partnership with the collective, and really try to take on the problems that we were facing here. Margin shrinking, customer counts down, same-store sales down, store counts down, average unit volumes down. And the problem with this was it was becoming the new normal. Like, there was no panic in the industry. Certainly, I have lots of contacts in the industry, and the problem that I found was, nobody was really treating it as the crisis that it was. And then we actually, as things happen, we had a crisis that was a once-in-a-generation test of not just our industry, but certainly for the purposes of where I was in this, on top of what was already a fairly unsteady standing for an industry and a disrupted marketplace. We found ourselves, really at the mercy of the COVID-19 crisis. There's a lot of superlatives to talk about, how this has affected the restaurant industry. I'll just go right to the numbers. Here's a Restaurant Canada estimate. This is from March 1st, and it hasn't even been updated. It's still a couple weeks old. 800,000 food service jobs have already been lost. 4 to 5 restaurants have laid off employees. 7 out of 10 food service operators will further cut back on hours or lay off more employees. This is all happening. Talking to friends, contacts from 20 years working in this industry, it's everywhere. No one is immune. There's success. There's some little bits of bright light, but really, we're talking about just essentially this evaporating right in front of us. Massively important industry evaporating right in front of us. Now, let's talk about, what's in front of us and what's happened so far. The sensitivity here around saying, forget about this, people that are going through much worse than we are at this point, and saying, let's just get past this. You have to think past this. Obviously, for March, April, the focus has been and will continue to be on mitigation and advocacy. And that has to be the focus and will continue to be the focus. And there's lots of great things happening around this. Some real innovative thinking and an amazing kind of come together with suppliers, restaurant organizations, and customers, really helping to try to stem the tide of this a little bit and give everyone a chance. That's all kind of we need right now. And some great things have happened. And for the most part, I think we'll look back on this and say we've done the right things, and the industry has done the right things, and the marketplace has reacted to actually, stem the tide a little bit on what could have been, and what certainly is the worst thing that's ever happened to the industry by far. But lots of interesting things happening, accelerating revenue model innovations. We were talking about this just before we jumped on live here, and talking about the way local businesses and bigger brands have adopted new revenue channels, and even shifted their business models, becoming much more engaged in the online space, increasing their their revenue channels to include things like grocery and meal kits, pivoting through innovation to really try to become something a little different. It's cool because it not only shows how innovative, incredibly innovative the industry is and the people are in it, but it actually shows what could be after the crisis. This is going to drive innovation beyond mitigation and advocacy. The innovation that we're seeing now is going to drive innovation beyond, as we're rebuilding, which is going to be really cool to see. And we'll see some of the most incredible innovation coming out of the restaurant industry, which will be exciting. Government subsidies and assistance, I'm not going to dive too much in that. I'm not the expert. I can tell you that the people that I've talked to are probably more confused and need more information rather than feeling super supported. But again, I don't think you can fault the government for piecing this together on the fly, and for the most part being pretty open-minded and open-ended about having discussions and getting involved with restaurant organizations. It was never going to be the fix it needed. It was never going to be the thing to save the industry. But what it will do, I think, is add to this list in terms of mitigation and advocacy that may just kind of stem that tide a little bit, and we'll look back on it and potentially will have helped make it become much worse than it is. Along with that, you can see groups like Cisco. I have lots of friends at Cisco. They've been phenomenal. The Foodies Unite, I encourage you to go have a look and see what they've done. They've really stepped up, beyond just providing resources and for restaurant brands and restaurants to look at. There's a lot of pressure on suppliers to be financially helping as much as they can. Beyond that, Cisco's done a really great job in trying to step in and help restaurants innovate, showing them what a grocery model might look like, showing them how the best practices around piecing together meal kits and adding in new revenue channels. So I applaud them. Again, it's never going to be enough, but in general, I do applaud how suppliers have come together. Consumer engagement, things like One Table, Ontario, Canada Takeout, Save Hospitality. This stuff's front and center, and it really is engaging customers in a new way, educating customers about the importance of the industry and the personal side of the industry. I think it's been fantastic. Really trying to drive habits and routines, out, away from the in-store because we can't be there, and into, driving the routine of online ordering and off-premise ordering. And I think I'm even seeing with a lot of people that, were never engaged in that in the first place, starting to build, that kind of routine around ordering online. So certainly mitigation and advocacy, is continuing. I believe, that there are people that are doing their best. And I think the bottom line here is we're going to see some great innovation coming out of this that will lead into what a new restaurant industry might look like. Moving right along, however, I do think it's time now, and actually, a couple weeks ago even, it's time to talk about recovery and reinvention inside of this, not just because there are ideas and things that are coming out of the mitigation and advocacy process, but just because it's really important to start looking forward. It's really important to use marketing. I think marketing is incredibly important. It's not about, you hear a lot about, is it too early to start marketing? You're seeing a lot of this sameness in traditional marketing on TV, but, brands trying to do the right thing. There's some people out there, certainly in the circles that I roll in, that are talking about not doing enough, that this is when brands should be stepping on the gas. For me, it's not about that. It's about the role marketing will play. I think marketing has a role in inspiring the industry recovery, kickstarting the marketplace, insulating against future socioeconomic threats, and establishes the restaurant industry as a force of change for greater good. We're in the spotlight, we're under the microscope, and I think thinking about marketing and its role in the recovery goes way beyond just the stuff we're going to do to promote ourselves. I believe the marketing and what we're doing to really drive customer engagement and awareness about the industry and about restaurant owners and restaurant brands can actually create something much bigger than just a recovery. So I'm excited about that, and I think it's time. But again, I think we have to listen to our customers as well and see what they're saying. There's tons of data out there, lots of great CX, customer experience insights, analytics that are being shared. And I encourage everyone to dig in, because a lot of this is coming at us for free. And there's insights brands, data brands, research companies that are sharing a lot of this stuff for free. There's a lot to be learned in whatever industry you're in. We recently at the collective partnered with a company called Cattle. Cattle's a little bit different. It's not a traditional market research company. I've worked with them before with Pita Pit. It's a mobile-first insights platform that rewards consumers for sharing their data and engaging with brands. In return, brands get access to insights faster, more cost-effectively than any other platform in Canada. So what I love about it is it's a very democratic way of working with customers to gain their insights, instead of really just digging in and running surveys. Cattle actually builds a huge database of customers that are participating in the economies and in the industries where we want to target. And it's in a very open-ended way, an authentic way, saying, we're going to reward you. Your insights are valuable. And we think so much of those insights that we're actually going to reward you. And as a result, you get a real depth of responses from these people as they're super engaged. So I'll just go quickly through this, guys, as I get beyond I knew I'd be running a little bit long, but I'll just run through this just to kind of get to where I'm heading in terms of my recommendations. But, some really interesting stuff. Prior to the COVID-19 crisis, consumers loved to dine out regularly. We're slower to adopt online ordering than we probably thought. Clearly, the industry as a whole was not adequately prepared to pivot to a more online focus in the face of closed in-store traffic. So, most restaurants and restaurant brands were actually unprepared for this. And that quick shift, that quick pivot to online, hasn't really benefited anybody, and really has left us pretty much scrambling to try to pick up the pieces on digital transformation. Good news is the work we do now on that is going to be rewarding later. And you can see just in the data results there. Some may be surprised at this, prior to the COVID-19 crisis, consumer motivations for choosing and returning, so actually intent to purchase and loyalty, were driven by food and customer experience, not by value or convenience, which is, I suspected that, but it's in the data. So with restaurants with the data to prove they were making great food while elevating convenience, friendliness, and their overall experience, would be well positioned heading into the crisis. So I'll be interested to see in the data after this, to see when the numbers come out, who were the companies that best were insulated against this and why. So more to see there. So there you go. Top 3 motivations for choosing a restaurant: they love the food, convenience, speed of service, friendliness, experience. Returning to a restaurant, same thing, except love the food, friendliness, experience. So upwards of 50%. All about the food experience and the customer experience, which I found to be very reassuring. Despite a heavy promotional emphasis on takeout and delivery since the onset of COVID-19, there really hasn't been a significant increase in takeout and delivery occasions. customers are getting their food elsewhere. So you can see most people aren't really ordering more because of this. So the people that had that habitually were ordering online or weren't, nothing about the crisis caused them to change their habits. A massive chunk, 40%, noted here that they wouldn't be ordering takeout and delivery from a restaurant for the rest of April. And why? I think we know this, the safety and cleanliness issues as the biggest barrier, even though only 28% viewed it with discomfort. So lots to learn there. Customers are optimistic about when they will be able to open their return to their pre-crisis dining habits, but they're also planning on visiting less often. The numbers are there. 62% think that they'll be back in less than 2 months, but 33% aren't going to be ordering as often as they were. So we have work to do. And 60% of respondents believe that conditions will allow them to return to their pre-crisis dine-in purchase habits in less than 2 months, but 22% will be visiting less often. Here's what customers are telling us is going to get them back. If you want to build customer engagement, intent to purchase, and loyalty, focus on the cleanest restaurant environment as part of that overall customer experience, and continue to focus on that exceptional customer experience. And you can see the numbers there that justify it. If anyone wants a look at the full survey, Cattle has generously offered to share it, so I can flip it over, especially if anyone's interested in talking to Cattle in more detail. Certainly be happy to share that on their behalf. So there is a recovery roadmap, I believe, and again, it goes back to what I really wanted to bring to the table here today, was to actually, tell you about what I believe and what this customer data tells us, and also, the kind of first steps into take this into your own businesses potentially, and really start to lead with that customer experience. Rebuild your relationship with your customers. Goes beyond just providing a good customer experience. We have to think of customers as stakeholders in our business, and really with how much people know now about how sensitive the restaurant industry is to fluctuations like this, to socioeconomic factors. They're going to be more invested in our success. It's very high profile, so there's no better time than to start openly seeking out customer motivations and behaviors about your business. Collect insights that reveal their customer journeys, and build simple, always-on engagement strategies around them. Reinvent your brand. I can't say this enough. The more data I look at, it's the brands that people loved and felt closest to that are the brands that will sustain through this and be there on the other side. Restaurant brands must be more deliberate about promising exceptional food and customer experience. Build this into the brand promise, like some of the great restaurant brands out there, like Chick-fil-A. Because these are the brands that are rewarded with long-term customer affinity, cultural relevance, and permanent brand differentiation. They makes you stand out when you take a stand. Clear brand promise defines and differentiates you, represents something bigger than selling. And again, this is kind of where a lot of the work we're going to be doing sets in. Marketing is forever changed. We have to look at it differently. Before this, we knew that people weren't paying attention to traditional marketing, and yet it was the go-to for even the biggest brands and the biggest budgets out there. Now is the opportunity to rethink. We have a better opportunity now than ever before to take advantage of this disruption and take advantage of how customers are looking at us, and really how we're in the spotlight right now. Marketing is not about the stuff you do. It should be the voice that speaks truthfully and transparently while building consensus through all your brand stakeholders. Throughout what doesn't work, restart with always-on marketing to drive purchase intent through the customer journey. Forget about short-term sales metrics. Focus on customer engagement, long-term brand relevance, and customer affinity. Now, I could have a whole other presentation on the how-tos here, but again, I'll have my email address at the end of this, and I'd love to talk to anybody that would be interested in talking about what this means. Sometimes sounds a little bit high level, especially when we're talking about big brands. The biggest gap, and I worked with franchisees for years, what I would try to tell them and reassure them about was they were a great brand too. Sure, we were inside of what I believe was a great brand, whether it be Pita Pit or Boston Pizza. They're great brands as well. So the behaviors and things big brands should be doing really is a direct reflection into what you could be doing locally. It's the same customers. It's the same insights that you're looking for. It's those same trends. It's just much more highly personal. The more personal you are, the better chance you have to keep them, to stay engaged with your customers and build these great habits. So don't be overwhelmed and think that you need to spend a lot of money. It's just about building discipline around new routines. Discipline, commitment to this routine is much more important than what you spend. This is my favorite marketing quote. My favorite marketer, Socrates. And this speaks to what I was just talking about. It's less about, what you spend money on. It's less about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say and to get it out there through awareness channels and to try to drive people into your store. The best way to gain a good reputation is to endeavor to be what you desire to appear. So if you just be it, focus on being what you are, that brand that you want to aspire to be, and build everything around it. Build your whole promise around it and deliver it. And then your customers will respond. That's how those factors come in to help that kind of long-term affinity and relevance that really, as we know now, really creates those long-lasting bonds with customers and that brand differentiation that will put you ahead of your customers. That's all I have. I'm a little long. Sorry about that, Braden, but there's my email. I'll leave it on there for a second. Happy to to chat with anybody. Love talking this stuff. So thanks for that. And I'll stop sharing here, and we'll jump back into to the Q&A, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brendan. That was awesome. I think the insights and the perspective you bring is a lot bigger than I think a lot of us think locally. Because we're often so worried about the day-to-day and the operation of our business that it can be challenging to get that 10,000 foot view of the industry and what those insights mean. So I think that's really valuable. One thing I guess I just want to touch on quickly before we jump too deep into Q&A is just, what are some of, if you would distill this down into a couple little insights for small businesses managing right now, what are some of the, if you were to give, this is a step 1 to look at, step 2 to look at, and step 3 to look at, what would you encourage small businesses and small restaurants to be evaluating right now so they can start to do that build forward?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I know, I mean, it's distilling it down to a how-to kit for local businesses. That's a whole other presentation. Like I said, I think there's lots of value in that kind of 10,000 foot look. When I worked with franchisees, I found that that usually was what they were most interested in, because like you said, their day-to-day is so filled with what was right in front of them. So what I've done over the years is really tried to shrink that gap and say, this really is as important to you right now as it is to the biggest brands in the world, because the customers are the same. You can't, you often start thinking about these big numbers. Well, I don't know what they're talking about in these charts and graphs. I know that someone's walking in the store right now and I need their business and I need them to come back. The 3 steps that I would take, Braden, just really simply before you do anything, and it's going to seem like it's a little bit counterintuitive, because it's like you want to say, I got to get out there. I need to drive people's awareness that I'm open, and I need people to purchase something right away. And I get that. And that's absolutely important. The first step, however, though, is to dive into learning more about your customers. You don't need a lot of money to do it. You can spend a lot of money to do it. But really taking those moments to use, if you're on social channels, really understand what people are saying and take some time, whether you or someone that works for you or someone that you hire, and try to distill what kind of insights are coming at you. Engage them with questions that are core to your business rather than promoting to them, and really make them feel like they're part of the decision-making process and that they're important. Start to gather those and piece them together in an Excel spreadsheet on a whiteboard to at least on a regular basis, whether it be in your monthly meetings or just in monthly regroup inside of your other business routines. Have a look at it. Say, what are customers saying? What's happening out there? What have I learned out of the notes that I've taken? It doesn't have to be perfect. I would encourage everybody to, and there's great companies that can support this. It's simple to do really cheaply though, is ensure that you're updating your review platforms like Yelp, et cetera, whatever, depending. I mean, again, I'm going down the restaurant line here, but if you're a customer facing company, really try to do your best to make sure you're responding and engaging with customers that are talking about you. So that would be first. On the marketing side of things, on the brand side of things, have a fun exercise about who you are, what your brand promise is, what makes you different, and put that up on the whiteboard and make sure that guides you every day. As you promise it to stakeholders over and over again, if it's unique, and I have a great fun exercise that I do with brands. It's a little game that I play. It doesn't need to be a massive exercise, but and I'd be happy to work with anybody on that. But really try to say what makes me different. What's kind of the North Star, and build that into everything. And then finally, really quickly on the marketing side, it's just about opening up and being really engaging, connecting with customers at every touch point. From a digital side, open up and engage with people wherever they are. Certainly, promotional points, investing in this, you can spend as much money as you want. Just on the base points, at every point, there's a potential for a customer to engage with you. Be there and continue to just engage with them and ensure that they have the opportunity to engage with you.
Awesome. Katie?
I actually have a restaurant specific question. So I'm sure you're aware, Kingston has the most restaurants per capita. What type of advice would you give what feels like an already very overcrowded market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, Katie, and again, it's so tough working with franchisees, asking them to take a moment, that crucial moment to step back and think about, building that relationship and creating something that they are that nobody else is, and driving everything through that lens. That's what I call the brand promise. It sounds very marketing textbooky, but it's actually vitally important. It's like I said in the presentation, take that customer engagement, that experience, and build it into a promise. Again, it's a great exercise to put it on the whiteboard. This is what we're promising people. This is what makes us different. You do it well. You do it through every point where a customer is engaging you. You don't have to promote it. Just do the things that people would expect from a restaurant, an organization, a company, or a person that would be making that promise. Again, it's for people where it's like, today is today and it's in real time and you don't understand, I need to get out there. It sounds so counterintuitive, but the routine of that, not saying you don't do anything else, but the routine of that first and that exercise, doing that right now, is so important on the other side of this for customers to be able to understand what makes you different, what makes you better.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question in terms of customer experience. I mean, what you've been saying, I think rings true in terms of these brands need to do a lot better job listening to their customers. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other areas that, or some of the most neglected areas that you're seeing with these brands beyond just not listening to their customers?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that I spared you guys the loyalty loop. Anybody that's worked with me over the last 5 years, how much I lean on the McKinsey and Harvard study. Look it up. It's the customer loyalty loop, and keying in on really looking at the points where the customers are and understanding that there's engagement opportunities and there's customers beyond just out there needing to hear about you or out there needing a deal to engage with you. It's actually understanding where the customers are that you might not realize or are unfamiliar with and finding ways to engage them. The first one, and I talked about it a little bit, is in the evaluation point. It's actually customers that know about you, maybe have visited you, but don't intend to come back for whatever reason. Really jumping in and getting those insights back in terms of online reviews, through Facebook, you get a broader understanding of where those miss points might be, and you can start to pour your efforts into those people so that you can understand where there might be a gap. Too often people go, I'm dumping everything in awareness, whether it be a newspaper ad locally or a local radio ad because there's a rep came into my restaurant to ask about it. Stuff has, I'm not criticizing traditional media. There's a space for it, but you can't over-index on awareness and sales promotion when you have so many customers sitting in that evaluation point. They know about you, but they don't intend to come back. Find out why and talk to them. That would be the biggest missed opportunity, I think, probably, John.
I think one of the things that I don't know if it's an unspoken thing or if it's just not a well-known thing, but like profit margins in restaurants are, I don't know if they're historically low, but like, now, if you have 5% profit as a restaurant, you're considered very successful. So when, a local restaurant runs into a crisis like this and has to close their doors, like there's not a long runway. And I don't know if consumers on the other side know that as much, right? And so is this a time when there needs to be a deeper reflection on the industry as a whole? And like, I guess I don't know if people know how tight the restaurant industry is, right? Like it's not cheap to make food and to serve it to people. I think regardless of if you're a Chick-fil-A or you're, a small one person, like one family restaurant, and I think I'm sure we've all come across those articles that, are like millennials and their avocado toast are going to be the death of society. And they're like, there's all those sort of claims, but it does cost a restaurant a lot of money to make good food. And yet in the data you showed, good food is why people go places.
Yeah.
So I guess I wonder do you see a shift in that now coming out of this crisis? Do you think restaurants should reevaluate how they price and how they model themselves as they build forward?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, a great question. And I think that going back into that data, there's no secret that great food and friendliness and great experience are also the most shareable, right, pieces. Very difficult to, you're not going to see necessarily, a customer say, look how clean this counter is, but they are going to say, my favorite pita roller. And I saw this all the time. The great example of this, forget about Pita Pit as a national brand. Think about Pita Pit as a local Kingston business. And they did this better than almost anyone that I've really ever seen do it. And what I loved about working with the teams in Kingston, and to a degree, they didn't have a choice because I was always on top of them. But to me, it's really important to fight for full price, right? It's the throwaway of margins on over discounting and positioning it as value to the customer when clearly customers don't want it. You can see that. I mean, it's small, whether it be 2, 3, 4% discounting, but using it to just throw it out there is a big mistake because those points coming back are massively important. Fighting for full price is what really, really good engaging brands do that are over-indexing on that great food and the great experience. And local businesses have the great opportunity to do this because they're so hyper-personal. Their customers, and working on that kind of engagement and providing value through things other than price and moving price out of the equation for local businesses will be absolutely vital. And it turns out, after 2008, it went exact opposite, and you're starting to see a little bit of it now. It's just flooding the market with what they believe is value, but it's really just discounting, and it's really just eroding value. Huge opportunity here, and I think you bringing this up, that you brought it up exactly as I would say it, Braden. Huge opportunity here is to reinvent based on a whole new value proposition for restaurants. And with that, you're not going to gain back, 10, 15 points in margin, but certainly in that battle for 2, 3, 4 points in margin, people will spend more when they're more loyal to you, when you're more relevant, they want to hear about you, when there's more opportunity to engage with you, they will spend more. So start focusing on those rather than creeping down that path of discounting.
Awesome. Thanks.
You talked a lot about like surveying. Do you have any tips? Because I know for like product and service-based businesses, you could do user
Mhm.
testing, but do you have any tips for specific to the food industry or even for small business on how they can gather some of that data so that they can use it?
Yeah, you know what? And we would, this was actually a big issue with us. I mean, really at Pita Pit, because, I mean, we weren't a massive company. I think in terms of Canadian quick service, we certainly had a lot of units and our sales were quite good. But it didn't mean we had a ton of resources. And so really finding out the right kind of bucket to build on gathering these insights and where to find them, the first thing you really need to do before you do any kind of surveying or bring in another partner is to find all of those points through kind of your own customer journey where customers are eager to reach out and talk to you. And this can be, again, we're so lucky to have social media and to be active on social media, because it's not just about, brands shouldn't just be pushing out content all the time. It's a great opportunity to find these loyal fans and give them a voice. We did that really well at Pita Pit. If you looked at Pita Pit's channels, and the group that worked with me on social media did such a phenomenal job of gaining insights, but we didn't curate them very well, and we didn't make them actionable very well. And I think that's kind of the next step is finding those points that are there already. Don't think of Facebook and social media as a fully promotional platform. Think about it as an insights platform. And these people are the most engaged with you. So there's value in that. And then secondly, I can't stress enough, really getting yourselves updated and being consistent wherever you are on the digital spectrum. Doesn't mean participate everywhere, but certainly if you're going to participate on social media, pick one that you can do really well and use that as your base point. And if you want to be real simple about gaining reviews, that's really where the best results are, is in peer reviews. And it's actually important. It's the best marketing tool for evaluation as well, because that's where people are looking for referrals to make decisions. So be active and engaging in responding to people when they take the time to make a review. Those are the first two. And then just ask questions when you're talking to somebody and someone comes into your store. Track those. Start to build in your favorite ones. Put them on that big whiteboard that I talked about.
Great, thank you.
Well, that's awesome. I think we gave people a lot. Oh, here we go. Look at that. A question, as I was going to say. Look, I think we've overwhelmed people with information.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So, well, before we let go, I'm going to ask you Paula's question. So, for non-food small business, would showing/doing how-to videos build brand experience? Being an eco-friendly brand, I am going to do videos on how to make a home inside and out green, and to show my clients that I live that life.
Yeah, what a great idea. My only, like, if you are, this is what I'm talking about, like, you want to make who you are and your promise as close to the customer and as authentic to the customer as possible. So you're right on track. Why advertise it when you have all of these channels to just say, this is who I am? And I'm as authentic on this video as if you walk up to me on the street. This is what I'm about. This is what my brand's about. I'm end up coming off, probably people are sick of me on platforms like LinkedIn because I go off on stuff like this. And I can't understand why so many big brands, knowing where customers' heads are at on terms of health or safety, if it were me managing the budgets for these big brands who are determined to continue to advertise, which is fine, all I would do would be to take a camera inside of the back of my restaurant and in the front of the restaurant and just show a day in the life of what we're actually doing that's going to take us to the other side, that's going to build that trust. Like, what better way to build that promise? So I love the idea. Sounds like it's a great space for where we're headed right now on the non-restaurant side. And again, it's the stuff I'm talking about. While it's a little bit kind of jaded by my years in the restaurant industry, I do believe it applies in something like that. So good. Send it to me. I can't wait to see it. That'd be great to see.
And I mean, for Paula, in the sustainability realm, tomorrow is Earth Day. So what a great time to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. And make it raw. Don't worry about production quality at this point. People don't care about that. They really don't. It's the content of it. And if it represents authentically who you are, can you build it up and as you get more comfortable, add in things to make it a little bit easier to consume? For sure. But at the end of the day, people are just happy to see somebody that's passionate about something.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A, and we've taken up a bunch of your time. So I just want to take a second to say thank you, and really appreciate you sharing this insight. I think, I think for restaurants, it's immensely valuable, but I also think for all small businesses, the reflection of customer experience and that customer journey and how you can create your own data and build some of that information. I think it's going to go a long way for businesses as we all navigate through this.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope there's some value, guys. I had a blast. I love doing this stuff, love talking about it. And I think what you guys are doing is really, really fantastic. So thanks for everything you do as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm going to throw it to Katie because Katie's going to set up next week for us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon, for joining us. So I just wanted to, as a follow-up for next week's session, it's going to follow suit from today. So we've actually identified 3 local businesses that we have invited to join the panel. The conversation that we're going to have is going to be around some of the decisions that they've had to make in the past few weeks, how they've redeveloped a service or a product, and then also how their customers are responding to what that is. And again, following suit from what Brandon mentioned today, what is their recovery plan as we move forward when we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel? So something else that you're going to notice in the coming days is we will be doing live interviews on Instagram as well, just doing local check-ins with local small businesses and kind of hearing about where they're from and what they're experiencing and how we can continue to support them. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. And we will see you next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Not 2 a.m., 10 a.m. Take care, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
We'll see you next week.